Talks between the US and Iran have stopped. Iran has announced its negotiating team is no longer exchanging messages with Washington through mediators due to Israel's attacks on Lebanon. Israel is pushing deeper into southern Lebanon and said it will target Beirut's southern suburbs, a Hezbollah stronghold. The UN Security Council is set to hold an emergency meeting in the coming hours to discuss the escalating conflict in Lebanon. Meanwhile, Israel says it will press on with its advance in Lebanon.
Following Israeli strikes on Lebanon's south, residents are leaving their villages. Israeli forces have attacked targets far inside the region, saying they are driving out Hezbollah fighters. The Israeli government has also said it intends to continue strikes on the Lebanese capital Beirut.
There will be no situation in which Hezbollah attacks our cities and our citizens while its terrorist headquarters in Beirut remain off limits.
Thousands are fleeing Beirut, and for some, it's not the first time.
This is the third time we're displaced. Now we're going to the kind people of Tripoli.
The fighting between Israel and Hezbollah also affects residents in Israel's north, close to the Lebanese border.
It feels as though we need to disappear from here for our lives to return to what they used to be. Work has been reduced to a minimum. Children's education has stopped, schools, kindergartens. We're constantly thinking about where this is heading and what will happen. So there's no doubt that it needs to end and come to a stop.
Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says that the military is continuing its advance in Lebanon's south.
This is to push threats away from the IDF forces and from the residents of Israel, and to turn the Litani area into a zone under IDF security control, free of weapons and terrorists.
This has raised fears that Israel could be moving toward a new long-term presence in Lebanon's south. Israel previously maintained a security zone there for 15 years, from 1985 to 2000. Last week, Israel seized the medieval Beaufort Castle, a vantage point overlooking large parts of southern Lebanon and the Golan Heights. France has called for an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council, while the EU is calling on Israel to stop the escalation.
The people of Lebanon have already endured immense hardship. They didn't choose this war, and this war is not theirs. The people of Lebanon and Israel have the right to live in peace, security and dignity, free from the threat of renewed conflict.
But the danger of new attacks is looming on both sides of the border, and the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon appears to exist only on paper.
Let's get some more on this now with Rowena Binti Abdul Razak. She's a lecturer in Middle East history at SOAS London. Good to see you again. Rowena, Iranian media have reported that Tehran is suspending indirect talks with the U.S. because of Israel's military actions in Lebanon. What message do you think Iran is trying to send with this?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, it's not surprising. Iran has always tried to link what happens in Lebanon with the negotiations with the U.S., with the ceasefire negotiations that it's trying to sort of have with the U.S. But of course, this has broken down. I think it's not just Lebanon aside. This is also Iran's way in which that it can try and break the negotiations. We know that U.S.-Iranian tensions hasn't really gone away. Over the weekend, U.S. and Iran had been exchanging missiles. A U.S. drone was attacked. Iran attacked a U.S. drone. Iran also attacked a U.S. base in Kuwait. So we know that tensions had not ceased. So even though Iran does want to link what happens in Lebanon with the overall ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, at the same time, Iran also wants to try and protect its own position. So this is also a way in which Iran can break the impasse in some way that's happening between the negotiators. The negotiations were not really going anywhere anyway. So Iran is also showing that it is able to stop the negotiating process and keep some kind of control and power over the situation.
I'm just trying to get a sense of the bigger picture here because there's a lot in motion right now. Tehran links events in Lebanon to what's happening in the wider region. How do you see it? Is Iran pursuing a broader regional agenda here?
Yes, to some extent, it wants to show that it's still able to control events in Lebanon. It wants to link whatever happens with Iran with the wider world. This is very much linked to its own strategy of linking whatever happens to Iran to the global economy. Hence, also bringing in its ability to close the Straits of Hormuz when it wants to also have some say in what the Houthis do with regards to access to the Red Sea. So clearly, Iran wants to play this wider regional role. But it also sort of reveals the need to have a regional solution. The US-Iranian negotiations cannot happen just bilaterally. We need other stakeholders in the region to also be involved. And I think Iran pulling out in the negotiations because of what's happening in Lebanon reveals that. It's not enough to just have the US and Iran on the negotiating table. It's important to have regional players as well, namely Israel, Lebanon, even the Gulf states as well. So I think this is what Iran wants to show as well, that it's not just a bilateral issue, it's a regional issue.
You mentioned the Red Sea and the Houthis. I'm just wondering about shipping routes in the Red Sea. Iran has already shown that it can squeeze the global economy in the Gulf, but could it actually be in a position to shut down shipping through narrow choke points in the Red Sea with the Houthis' help in Yemen?
This is possible. The Houthis are quite aligned with Iran, and we do know that the Houthis have restricted access through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait through the Red Sea. So we know that they are capable of doing that, especially after October 7th. They did restrict shipping through that area as a kind of protest against Israel. But we do notice that since the war between the US and Iran, the Houthis have not been mobilized for this yet. Iran may assert control and may assert influence over the Houthis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Houthis would act based on what Iran wants. They can still act independently. And so far, we've seen that they haven't closed the strait in kind of protest to what's happening against Iran. So it's realistic. Iran can try and persuade the Houthis to do this in exchange of whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Houthis will follow.
As you say, we're at a bit of an impasse here in this. What prospects do you see for Iran and the U.S. resuming talks and negotiating with each other in good faith to end this crisis?
This is very difficult. Even Trump himself has said that maybe stopping negotiations for the moment is a good thing, because it's also tied very much to things like the nuclear issue, which is a very difficult sticking point for both the US and Iran. The US want Iran to stop their enrichment process. Iran doesn't necessarily want to, sees it as part of its sovereign rights to have a nuclear program. So things like that makes it very difficult for negotiations to continue. So having a little bit of a break might not necessarily be a bad thing. It might be a way in which both sides can kind of rethink strategy, rethink what they both want. It's generally regarded that US actions in Iran has not really brought much for the US. So this might be an opportunity for the US to rethink, and same with Iran. So both are kind of showing what they're capable of doing and capable of sort of pulling back. But that doesn't necessarily mean they won't return to the negotiating table.
Rowena, thank you very much. That was Rowena Binti, Abdul Razak, lecturer at SOAS, London.
Thank you for having me.
All right, joining me now is Bauke Baumann, an international security expert who closely tracks military developments and geopolitical risks across the Middle East. It's good to have you with us. I mean, you have been watching these escalations closely. What has changed in the last 24 to 48 hours that makes this moment, in your opinion, more dangerous than what we've seen in the recent past?
The ceasefire between Iran and the US has been always very fragile, as there is no detailed conditions or let alone a verification mechanism. But now it's even more dangerous after all these clashes in the Strait of Hormuz and now the stop of indirect negotiations. as a conflict might quickly spiral out of control and misperceptions are very likely. So even though this might be just a tactical move to increase the leverage in negotiations by Iran, it could lead to further escalation.
Do you have the impression that Israel is seeing these two conflicts as being connected at this stage? Or do you get the impression that Netanyahu is only looking at the goal of getting rid of Hezbollah?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, on the one hand side, the Israeli government always claims it's separated theaters and they have the right to basically continue the fight against Hezbollah. And on the other hand side, I mean, Netanyahu knows very well that he might explode any deal with Iran by escalating in Lebanon. And I think this is also very much his aim, as he's like opposing any deal with Iran. And also, like, it's not in his interest that Trump and Iran have a deal. So I think, yes, he knows that these theaters are connected.
Where then does the United States fit into all of this right now? And I'm wondering, is Washington still able to contain this situation?
I mean, yes, but especially Donald Trump is facing difficult decisions. I mean, if he want to contain it, then he needs to put pressure on Israel to stop, or at least to decrease its attacks in Lebanon, and go for a deal that would need big concessions to an Iranian regime that is, of course, brutal to its own citizens and brutal to the region. But this would be the way forward, even though he might then have a deal that very much looks like the JCPOA of Obama. The other way would be to just let go and risk another round of war and exchange of missiles and attacks, which would be dangerous for the whole region. And especially there's no real result in sight. I think militarily there's no real aim that could be achieved in another round. At least that's how I see it.
You know, there are reports that Iran could soon launch more missiles to hit targets in the Middle East, and that it could do that because the regime is able to access weapons that it had buried. Now, if this is true, what does this tell us about U.S. claims that the U.S. military was able to completely degrade Tehran's military?
I mean, it tells us very much that either there is not a complete picture of the intelligence of Israel and the US, which is very likely, that there are hidden sites where the Iranian regime has hidden missiles and other materials, or I say what they communicated publicly did not really match with the findings intelligence had, and was very much motivated by political agendas of Donald Trump, who wants to declare victory or big success, and which, we now see that this success is limited.
And I'm wondering, is there really any pressure right now on the regime in Tehran to find some type of peace deal? I mean, they have also said in the last 24 hours that shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is still the option.
I mean, the regime sees itself as having the upper hand and negotiating from a very strong position. But in fact, they are faced with a lot of pressure. I mean, the war has like a tremendous cost for the regime and even more for the Iranian people. I mean, the economic situation is really dire. A lot of things are destroyed. Nevertheless, I think the regime is ready to go all in and is ready to put all these costs on the shoulders of the Iranian people. And therefore, I think they are still ready to even close the Strait of Hormuz completely, even if it's detrimental to themselves. And of course, they would need as well a deal that gives sanction relief, that made the frozen assets would be freed. This would help them enormously. This no peace, no war situation in the long term will be dangerous for the regime.
Mr. Baumann, we appreciate your time and your insights on what remains a volatile situation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And joining me now is Sina Azodi, Director of Middle East Studies at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. His latest book is called Iran and the Bomb, the United States, Iran, and the Nuclear Question. Mr. Azodi, it's good to have you with us. You know, last week you and I spoke, and there was reason to ask you if we were looking at the talks between the U.S. and Iran collapse before our very eyes. So let me ask you today, are we there yet?
No. Last week, as we actually approached the last weekend, we were very close to getting a deal between Iranians and Americans. But I think that President Trump, is under a lot of pressure from the right wing of his own party, the so-called Iran hawks, and these organizations that have been trying to derail engagement between Iran and the United States. So he has been pressured to toughen up his stance on Iranians. And I think the ongoing conflict in Lebanon has made the situation even worse. In the last hour that I've been looking at the reports, Iranians have announced that they are going to suspend exchanging messages with the United States in protest to Israel's operations in southern Lebanon. Mm-hmm. So I don't say that the talks have collapsed, but we have not finished. We haven't crossed the finish line of getting a deal between Iran and the U.S. to end the conflict.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point now with Iran saying that an end to the Israeli offensive in Lebanon is now a key condition for any peace deal. I mean, what is this going to do then to peace talks? I mean, they were already difficult enough. I'm just wondering, when do we reach the threshold that tells us that a peace deal is just not possible at this moment?
Well, I think that peace is within reach. I think that, but Israel, or rather the Lebanese theater, is adding yet another difficult dimension to the already difficult negotiations between Iranians and Americans. Mm-hmm. From Iran's standpoint, the conflict in Lebanon can drag Iranians to the conflict in future. Mm-hmm. This is why they're insisting that conflict has to end in all theaters. This is, of course, in addition to the ideological ties between the supporters of the Islamic Republic and the Shias in Lebanon. But I think it's more strategic than ideological.
Do you think that Israel even sees these two conflicts as connected at this stage? Now, I'm talking about its conflict against Hezbollah in Lebanon and, of course, its war with Iran.
Well, I believe that the Israelis think that they have the momentum since the terrorist attacks of October 7, that the Israelis responded. I think that they have the momentum. They can reshape the region. The Israelis have spoken again about the greater Israel. From that, this is what the Israeli officials have actually said. And I think they have the momentum. They can change the region, as I said. And in Lebanon, they believe that they can quash and completely destroy Hezbollah, which is Iran's major ally in the region. This is why they're continuing their offensive. And I also think at the same time that they can put pressure on Iranians and the Americans at the same time.
Mm-hmm. There are reports that Iran could soon launch more missiles to hit targets in the Middle East because the regime is accessing weapons that it had buried. So it's uncovering these buried weapons. What does this tell us about claims by the Pentagon that Iran's military has been completely degraded? And also, if this is true, what does this tell us then about intel that we have concerning Iran?
Well, I've seen this report many times that the Iranians have been able to very quickly access to the missiles that were buried under the rubbles because they had, they had buried them in tunnels underground, what they call underground missile cities. That were attacked by the joint attacks by the Israelis and the Americans. But when, look, I think that the claims made by President Trump and Pentagon were not accurate, including the destruction of Iran's Navy. I mean, if Iran's Navy was completely destroyed, then how are they holding on, putting a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz? We did see that during the 40-day war, the number of missiles that the Iranians fired at the American interest and the Israeli interest in the region, the numbers went down, but the success rate actually went up, and the Iranians showed more success in hitting more valuable targets in the region. So I don't believe that the reports by Pentagon or the reports made by President are actually accurate. And in fact, yesterday he told Fox News that President Trump said that he left the Iranian military largely alone, which contradicts his own claims in the past.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The Washington Post is reporting that the president is telling everyone to, and I'm quoting here, to just sit back and relax. It will all work out in the end. That doesn't sound like a president who is sensing any pressure to get this deal done sooner rather than later. I mean, do you think the president, I know you say from the right-wing part of his party, but it doesn't sound like pressure to me when I read his quotes.
I mean, he can claim that everything is fine, everything is quiet and calm, but this is not what the Americans are feeling at the gas stations. The price of gas in the past 2 months has gone up. The last time I put gas right before the conflict, it was $2.80 per gallon. Right now, it is more than $4, $4.50 in some places. This is Washington, D.C. area, and in California is even higher. The inflation has gone up again, 3.8. So again, for political purposes, the president can claim that everything is fine, but this is not what the average Americans are feeling at the gas stations.
Mr. Azodi, it's always good to talk with you. Good to get your insights on this story. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good to be with you.